I've been talking a lot lately about the MAGA civil war that's ripping apart the far right and the moderate right, if you'll call them that. Now, moderate right basically means white nationalist, genocide supporter, and that means it's not all that moderate, but unfortunately, the right has gotten so insane these days, and the Overton window has shifted so far right within politics, that moderate right now means white nationalists who are also Zionists, and far right means white nationalists who are so Nazi, they hate Jews and Israel, and they can't even bring themselves to respect the fact that Israel is kind of an ethno-state itself. Like they can't even give them props for that. So you got the super Nazis and the super Zionists on the right, and they're fighting. They're having a big old fight, because on the Zionist side of things, you've got people who believe that Israel is, you know, the best ally of the U.S. and we should be supporting it and backing it. Christian nationalists really love Israel because, if you don't know this, as per the Bible, or at least how a lot of American Christians interpret the Bible, the rapture and the holy assumption of the of godly people into heaven, that is to say, just getting lifted into heaven without even having to die, you just get granted access with your living body and soul, that is not something that can happen. And that happens, of course, when Jesus returns, which cannot happen until God's chosen people, the Jews, have their holy land, the land of milk and honey, Israel, back in their hands. So there's a very strong Christian nationalist motivation behind the, not just the existence of Israel as it exists today, but its expansionism. The idea of expanding it and just destroying every Palestinian in your path to create this, biblically divine, ordained land that must exist, that's supposed to exist, that must exist for Jesus to come back, gives you an understanding of why so many conservatives are just like willing to, it gives you an understanding of why so many American conservatives will go rabid about Israel. Why it's like they a lot, as much of it as it is a meme, a lot of them act as though it's Israel first and America second, and it's weird, right? Like, why are these hardcore Christian conservative Americans so Netanyahu's ass? Then you realize it's the religious nationalist perspective. Like, it goes hand in hand. And when you know that, and you know how many evangelicals want Israel to exist purely because it's a thing, it's a detail, a footnote in their religion and the predictions on how, like, the rapture happens, that is why they back it. That is almost entirely why the right backs it, and it's hilarious. On top of that, there is military benefit that Israel and our allyship with them does bring, but really it's largely ideological. Now, obviously, I'm not, like, insane. I don't think Israel should be, like, destroyed or whatever like that. There are a lot of progressives who think that. What I do believe is that Netanyahu needs to go to prison, and he needs to rot there for the rest of his life. And I also would love if he went down in the history books of the planet as a genocidal maniac. I would also like Mossad to be recognized as basically not much better, really, than a terrorist group. Like, tell me exactly how putting bombs in a bunch of pagers, some of them being held by terrorists and some of them being held by random-ass people, and then detonating them at a random time when many of those members are actively in grocery stores and in houses and at, like, daycares and schools just all over the place, just setting bombs off in their pockets. That's terrorism, okay? Like if Mossad yelled Allahu Akbar before doing that, the world would be against them, okay? Like we're not going to rant about Israel, though. We're not going to do that. My point is, it has become not just one of these wedge issues for the left, it's become a wedge issue for the right. And this has led to a civil war among Republicans, because the discontent about what Israel is doing isn't just on the left. Even some on the right see Israel as like a genocidal nation. It's not America. It's on the opposite side of the planet, more or less. So why are we sending so much money over there? And why are we supporting a genocide? Even conservatives find themselves asking this question. And when the mainstream right is unwilling to answer that question satisfactorily, they just make excuses for the atrocities, you're going to try to find a aligned figure, a conservative one, who's actually willing to call out the shit that even the right can see is wrong. And unfortunately, the people on the right who have locked in that brand are those like Nick Fuentes, who criticize Israel not because of any reason why we criticize Israel, for instance. He criticizes Israel because Israel contains half of the world's Jewish population. Simple as that. Nick Fuentes and most of the right who hate Israel do not hate Israel for their war crimes. They hate Israel because half of the planet's population of Jewish people live in Israel. If anything bad happens to Israel and its people, that bad thing happens to half of the Jews on the planet. It would be like if Israel got nuked tomorrow, it would be like a billion times worse than the Holocaust in terms of mass death of Jewish people. There is a reason why these far-right people criticize Israel, and they are so against it, and it's not the good reasons. It's the wrong reasons. So with that in mind, this has led to a big schism on the right. I don't think this is a secret at this point. Ben Shapiro is one of the more, traditional Zionist conservatives, while, Nick Fuentes and his cronies, the Groypers, are the more critical Zoomer brand of conservative, and they are going at it hard. They have finally reached the point now where an issue of relevance has become so relevant that it's driving a wedge on certain issues. When in the past, people like Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes, they didn't like each other, but they still tolerated each other's existence. Like, you didn't see Nick Fuentes ordering Groypers to go mass report Nick Fuentes or Ben Shapiro off of YouTube because he's Jewish. Because even though Nick hates Ben because he's Jewish, the Nazis hate Ben because he's Jewish, they still recognize him as a good onboarder. That he gets a lot of young people into conservatism, and those young people who are conservative are going to be very likely to discover and get into Nick Fuentes. That's why, for a long time, they let each other be. Now, though, things have gotten so spicy, they really have nothing to fight for as far as goals either, considering Trump's in power. Like, there's no woke controlling the government to fight against. So it's just, all there is to do is infight and purity test. There's no battle to fight anymore. They've claimed victory so consistently for the last 10 months. What are they supposed to do now? Go directly from claiming victory to claiming it's time to fight again? Against what enemy? Against what enemy in power? Like, once you win as hard as you did a year ago, it sucks for a bit for your enemy, but then it gets to the point where when the ball's in your court, you don't handle it right, no one's going to blame anyone but you. And that's what's happening to the right at this very moment. So we got a video from Ben Shapiro here called "This is Why Republicans Are Losing." And I thought we'd dive in and, debunk it, give it a watch. Maybe we'll agree with a lot of it. Who knows? I haven't watched it. We're going in blind. But if you do end up enjoying the video, leave a like and a comment down below if you'd like to support the channel. Subscribe if you want to see more from me. And, of course, maybe hype the video to boost it. But more importantly, join my fan Discord, link down below to be a part of my community. It's a blast in there. It's awesome. Make sure you join. Down below in the description. But without any further ado, let's get into this Ben video.
The dumb take from the right.
True, the dumb take from the right is every take. Ben Shapiro left arc? Let's go. I'm not gonna lie, his hair is on fleek today. Can we all agree? Like, he must have gotten that shit, like, lined up today. Like, full on got the, like, tweezer and, like, hot wax strip treatment right along the hairline and everything. That shit is clean. God damn. He just got his hair cut. You can tell he got his hair cut that day, if not the day before, for sure. I know, I hate to point this out, it's not relevant, but, like, you gotta admit, that hairline is on fleek right now. It is so fucking, like, straightened out, dude. Like, he's got well-kempt hair. That's that Mar-a-Lago hairline, exactly.
Is that the reason that Zohran Mamdani is now mayor of New York, or that Mikey Sherrill won?
Dude, imagine how good I'd look on camera if I had a fucking stylist to work on me for, like, 10 minutes before I went live. God, that would be crazy. I would look good in every video.
In New Jersey, or that Abigail Spanberger won in Virginia, is because people were critical of Tucker Carlson's interview with a neo-Nazi last week.
I really like this. Ben Shapiro is blaming the fact that the right failed across the board in elections on the MAGA Civil War. I'm sure it's played a decent part in it. I don't think that, like, purity testing and infighting for the right is good for them. But I think this is well, it's a bit of a tunnel vision moment from Ben Shapiro, isn't it? Like, Ben has been obsessed with this whole MAGA Civil War thing for the last week. He's been going hard against the Nazis on the right, against the anti-Zionist types and the people who just hate Jews. And it's very clearly what's at the forefront of his mind. His heart is actually in this topic in a way it's not in others. And so what's clearly happening is he sees the right lose elections across the board, and his mind is so tunnel visioned on this right-wing civil war going on, he assumes that must be the cause of it. I'm sure it's not helping. It's definitely not helping. But I think we all know the reason why Republican plus 20 areas were able to go blue in the election the other day was because Trump. And what Trump's election brought with it. The unanimous Republican victory in the last election meant that we've now spent 10 months suffering as things get worse, and there truly is no one to blame but Trump and the Republicans. Like, that's it. When times are really tough for a whole 4 years, the incumbent party cannot win. The Democrats could not win the last election. It wasn't because of any strategy fuck-up. Could they have done things better? Maybe. But I genuinely don't necessarily think they could have. I think they were doomed from the start. Post-COVID, the world, the global economic turmoil, every progressive incumbent party in the country lost their elections in that year. When you're an incumbent party and things are really bad, you just can't win. I'm telling you right now, if things continue even a fraction of as bad as they have been lately, Trump just will not, the Republicans, no Republican, will be able to win in 2028. The anti-incumbent bias will be so extreme that it won't just be the end of Trump's political career, but it could seriously harm the Republicans in the future. And with the Republicans tying themselves so strongly to Trump, once he's gone, I don't think they're going to be able to find a new person who can be the next Trump. I don't think even Don Jr. could be the next Trump.
A few things about this. Well, one, Jack Posobiec tweeted, "Thank goodness so many conservative pundits spent the last few weeks focusing on e-drama and cancellation efforts instead of working to get out the vote. That was very helpful to the movement."
I mean, do we really think that people online engaging in e-drama keeps them from going out to vote? I can tell you, multiple times I've gone out to vote on the same day that I was on the internet watching an internet drama. I know for a fact that has happened, that I have voted on the same day that I have spent some amount of time on the internet watching drama.
And I will point out at this point that Tucker Carlson, who has come under absolutely deserved fire for glossing Nick Fuentes last week.
Glossing? You mean... Ben, it's glazing. Like, when you nut on a lady, and she looks like a glazed donut, when you're glazing somebody. Wait. Why would... Was Ben, like, getting that wrong? Glossing somebody? Is glossing a term? Because what I assume he meant was glazing. It would have worked there, too.
The infighting did not begin with people critical of Tucker Carlson. It began with Tucker Carlson, who has spent precisely zero effective time attacking Zoran Mamdani. I have before me a list of the times that Tucker Carlson mentioned Zoran Mamdani. And the answer is, he mentioned Zoran Mamdani on episodes 3 times in the last 2 years. 2 years. And he did mention Zoran Mamdani one time in the past month. It was with Marjorie Taylor Greene praising him on October 22nd.
They're so mad about Mamdani. I love it, dude. I fucking love it. And you know what's so crazy about it? Is that they're talking about Mamdani like he's the start of, like, the socialist, like, fall of America. And it's so funny. Mamdani is, I think, not... Okay, what I think's so beautiful about Mamdani's election is that it shows that a place like New York City that is already biased more in favor of voting left. You know, what did Sliwa get? Like 7% of the vote or something in New York City in the mayoral election? It was like 7%, 6%, something really low like that. And the real race was between Mamdani and Cuomo pulled like 41% of the vote, or like 40% or something. Mamdani pulled like 50, or it was like it was like 51% or something like. It was like he pulled over half, and Cuomo and Sliwa both like shared well under half. And so it was a very strong victory on the part of Mamdani. And what I think really shows about that election isn't that American Democrats are moving towards Mamdani's politics. It's that the Democrats are starting to realize some parts of the country are progressing into much more left-wing politics than others. And New York is one of those places. New York is now the place that has elected AOC and Mamdani, and I think a handful of other iconic members of the squad. This is a city that is obviously already default has a floor as far as how right people are willing to go, but the people there chose Mamdani's progressive politics over Cuomo's establishment centrist politics. Cuomo ran as an independent because he wanted so hard to try and prove that, like, Mamdani's politics could not make it in an election. That the Democrats need to avoid going more to the left. And the fact is, Mamdani proved, at least in certain areas, we definitely do need to move further left. While you're probably not going to win many votes for, like, a socialist-aligned candidate in Florida, it looks like that's exactly the kind of candidate you need to run in somewhere like New York. If you want to win in New York City right now, be a Mamdani, not a Cuomo. If you want to win in somewhere like Florida, maybe we would need a Cuomo more than a Mamdani. The fact is, the Democrats need to realize, based on locality, you got to be willing to back anyone as centrist as, unfortunately, maybe Cuomo, or as right-wing, or left-wing, sorry, as like someone like Mamdani, if the area is open to supporting policy like that. And the best part of it is, if Mamdani does a good job in New York, and I think he will, keep in mind that AOC is the most popular politician on the planet. On the planet! AOC. Okay? If Mamdani keeps up that trend, if he does the same kind of job that AOC has done, and becomes, say, the most popular mayor on the planet, America is going to notice. America is going to see this guy who has been endlessly ridiculed and criticized by the right, and they're going to see him have skyrocketing approval ratings, be the world's most popular politician. For those that don't know, AOC is so popular, even Republican MAGA people follow her and voted for her. But AOC is so popular that the people who vote MAGA in her district also vote for her as their representative. Because she has so much popularity, she gets MAGA Republicans to vote for her because she's so likable. I think Mamdani could be the mayoral version of AOC, and if she is, it's going to tell America, hey, you know that crazy Mamdani guy with the way too far left politics? Turns out, New Yorkers are fucking loving him. New York is in a better place than it's ever been. He has got skyrocketing approval ratings and is the most popular mayor on the planet. This is not an unrealistic possible scenario for how Mamdani's mayorship could go. And if it does go that way, I think we're going to see a lot of Americans go, hey, we want somebody like Mamdani too. And it's going to start putting pressure on the Dems to start running more progressive candidates. We're going to start seeing less Cuomos and more Mamdanis in the Democratic Party. A lot more Bernies, a lot more AOCs, and less Kristen Sinemas and Chuck Schumers.
Guy was the only person in the New York City mayor's debate to say he wanted to focus on New York City. All the candidates were asked, if you could visit a foreign country, what would it be? And they all, of course, all
and Pelosi is retiring.
Had an answer. I think most said Israel. Great. And he said, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay in New York. And like, if I want to meet Jewish constituents, I'd go to their synagogues, their homes, or whatever. But I'd be here in New York because that's what I'm doing. I'm running New York. That's my job.
Well, he gave the right answer.
He gave the right answer.
I mean, with that kind of critique, I can't imagine how Zohran Mamdani won. I mean, that sort of fiery critique of Zohran Mamdani's pro-jihadism and Marxism. I mean, wow.
Pro-jihadism and Okay. Marxism is when you don't want to see poor people starve on the street for a Republican like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has said that Palestinians, I believe his quote was that Palestinians live in sewage or something like that, when he was trying to argue for literally all of them to be bombed. He used to be very open about how much he just wanted, like, total Palestinian death a years back, before this particular conflict became the focus of everybody's attention, and everyone was like, okay, genocide? Y'all see it, right? That's not good? We don't like genocide? So yeah, people did not focus on it as much back then, and he was a lot more open about the fact that he just wants to see Palestinians killed. So it's just, I mean, if that is apparently, like, opposing that view is being jihadist in Ben's view. Mind you, jihad means holy war. Ben is accusing Mamdani of being in favor of justifying acts of violence and war with God as your justification. He's literally just trying to evoke, like, racist, bigoted, like, feelings in people. Like, oh my god, he's a brown guy, his last name's Mamdani, oh my god, aren't you scared? Oh my god. And then, of course, you got losers like the ex-mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who was at one point one of the most popular politicians on the planet post 9/11, or at least in the country post 9/11, because, you know, it was very hard not to be seen as very popular in the position he was in. But, you know, he's not anywhere near as liked as he used to be. And he posted an image when Mamdani won that had an image of the towers burning on 9/11, and they had, like, images of Mamdani in the smoke coming out of the towers, like kind of like as if he's being projected onto it, and it was captioned, "America forgot." Have you not seen this? Let me see if I can find it for you guys. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, it's so bad. Oh, why can I not find it? No! No, it's not it. Yeah, it's not even coming up anywhere. Damn. Damn. Here it is, Instagram. I had to go to his Instagram and I found it. No one's talked about it on any social media. No articles have been written about this post. Nothing. You have to go to his social media to find it. Look at this shit. New York, you forgot. And it's him, like, on Ground Zero when he was giving the speeches during 9/11 and everything. Which is, of course, this is meant to be, you know, obviously a response to Mamdani winning. And he's like, America, this is what you're asking for. It's like, what the fuck? Never forget, but you forgot. Jesus Christ.
Stellar stuff. By the way, just by way of comparison, I had my staff count up how many times I have covered Zoran Mamdani at length on this program since just June. The answer is 64. Since October 5th, the answer is 17 times. Since
didn't really make much of a difference now, did it, Ben? If anything, with how much Mamdani overperformed, it almost seems as though your shitting on him made him more popular. Maybe the rest of the Republicans knew what they were doing by ignoring him. Like, literally no one could twist what he believed in negatively besides your attempts to do so, and just attempting to call him a jihadist because he criticizes Israel is not exactly going to work well with an audience of people who you are currently acknowledging are not exactly fans of Israel. Being a shill for Israel is not what's going to win Republicans' elections anymore either. So, welcome to the new land of politics, Ben. Welcome to the new land of politics. Zionism ain't very popular these days, my friend.
It's October 5th. In the last week, I did 4 separate episodes. 4 separate episodes about Zoran Mamdani. By the way, we also cut a Get Out the Vote ad, basically for Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey. And you may have noticed where we are. We're in New York. Like, my entire team came to New York to cover this particular story. So if we're talking about who is directing fire against the left, which seems to be the question, I think it is pretty obvious who is not directing fire against the left. In fact, that Marjorie Taylor Greene, beloved of Tucker Carlson's program, and a person who is earning strange new respect from the left, she had the opportunity yesterday.
Strange new respect from the left. I don't respect Marjorie Taylor Greene at all, but I do appreciate, there's a key difference, the fact that she is kind of going her own way, in the sense that, like, she used Trump and his popularity during the MAGA era, and quite very much noticed when Trump's time began to come. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene might be one of the most socially politically, not actually politically, but socially politically. And what I mean by that is she knows very well where the country's at. I think she's very good at knowing where the country's at politically on a social level. And I think the moment we saw MTG starting to turn against Trump was the moment when the writing was truly on the wall, enough for at one point, his biggest supporters, his biggest sycophants, to start disconnecting herself from the brand of Donald Trump and start building her own. That is what Marjorie Taylor Greene has done. She is becoming her own Trump, not riding off the coattails of him. She realizes that the beginning of the end for Trump has already started, and she's already starting to, detach herself from him and start to create her own cult of personality. And a big part of that involves criticizing the guy that she was originally following, which is Trump. And so she's now one of Trump's bigger critics within the Republican Party because she wants there to be, MTG Republicans, not just MAGA Republicans. And so it's less that she's getting more respect from the left, and it's more that the left is like, what's going on? Why is she going so hard against Trump? Because from their POV, it's just this overnight switch-up where Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of Trump's biggest sycophants to her being one of his biggest critics, to joining with Democrats to out the Epstein files. And the reason she's doing this, very transparently, is because she wants to be the Republican who can say she worked with Democrats to release the Epstein files. So when people criticize her in the future, she's going to look very principled. She's going to have probably a lot more ground to stand on politically in the future after all this. I could see Marjorie Taylor Greene being one of the Republicans who doesn't need Trump to be in politics anymore to continue being successful. I think this is her taking measures to ensure that.
To appear on The View. Now, that's kind of an unusual opportunity for people on the right. Typically, you're not given an opportunity to appear on The View, specifically because they don't want anybody right-wing on. But the good news is that The View, which used to consider Marjorie Taylor Greene a low IQ Republican worried about Jewish space lasers, now they consider her a low IQ Republican concerned about Jewish space lasers, but also who agrees with them. And that means she gets on The View. Ari, more on...
Well, I mean, I just laid out very clearly why people on the left have grown some level of appreciation for MTG, not respect, and has nothing to do with Marjorie Taylor Greene agreeing. It's entirely that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not riding the coattails of Trump and is doing her own thing, making herself into her own Trump, pretty much, on her own, which involves criticizing Trump for things that in the past Republicans would never acknowledge was even real. And so, yeah, to an extent, there is some level of appreciation for that, but it's not respect. I would never call it respect.
This coming up in a moment. First, if you're struggling with credit card debt, you're not alone. There are tons of people who are these days.
Okay. Why are so many Americans struggling with credit card debt right now, Ben? Would it happen to be that people are maxing out their credit cards right now, trying to make car payments and to pay off their utilities and bills due to Trump's collapsing economy? After multiple quarters of declining GDP growth and even a quarter of GDP shrinkage? That's right. The United States' total quarterly productivity, dropped one quarter. Unbelievable. There's literally, unbelievably bad. Hold on. I don't think you guys realize how game-changing this was. The U.S. economy shrank in the first quarter of 2025 with a GDP decline of about 0.5% at an annual rate, following a period of contraction. This initial drop was linked to factors like a surge in imports ahead of tariffs, slowing consumer spending, and declining federal government outlays. The economy then rebounded significantly in the second quarter, growing at a rate of 3.8% annually. Obviously, the economy of the United States is very tough, and when it gets hurt, it tends to bounce back very, equally as strong as it got hurt. But just because the market began to bounce back and GDP started to bounce back doesn't mean that every other factor you could measure Americans' way of life by isn't doing worse. For instance, we've been seeing that I think it's something like 18% of Americans now are missing car payments. And the significance of that is it's one of the number one predictors of when Americans have lost all of their spending money and are now having to dip into their living money. That Americans, a significant amount of Americans, went from having enough money to pay all their bills and some to spend on top of that or put into savings to now having no money to spend on leisure or savings and having to dip into that money just to pay the bills off. And even there, in some cases, they're having to pay late fees. They're having to make payments late. This is not a sign of an economically stable country, population-wise. So our GDP has recovered to some extent. A lot of the drop, as historical as it was a reaction to Trump doubling down on the tariffs alone and the prepping that a lot of these retailers did, buying as much as they possibly could ahead of time before the tariffs went into place and importing got a lot more expensive. But yeah, like the economy is screwed. Why exactly do you think so many people are in credit card debt right now, Ben? Curious. Why do you think so many of your own supporters might be in credit card debt that you would take this sponsorship? Wouldn't have anything to do with the current administration's economic policy now, would it, Ben? Now, would it, Mr. I'm pretty sure Ben's got several economics classes under his belt. The fact that he's never once called out Trump for wanting to put tariffs on raw resources being imported into the United States for manufacturing is insane. It shows how blatantly just up Trump's ass he is, how much he's unwilling to even criticize the most, mundane points about Trump. Even as someone who might have a direct line to Trump, he refuses to criticize certain positions he holds. If he's ever taken an economics class in his life, he should know that in no universe is it a good idea to put tariffs on raw materials that you're importing in order to try and bolster your American manufacturing, which was the whole point of the tariffs in the first place. Trump has actively made American manufacturing more expensive, but also simultaneously made buying overseas more expensive because he's too stupid to realize there's a difference between importing goods that people buy off of shelves and importing inputs which go into factories and get made into products made in America that then get put on American store shelves. Trump is tariffing both, making both more expensive to bring into the country, and you have to bring raw materials into the country if you're going to manufacture here. We do not have a robust store of resources on our land that we can entirely rely on. What's outside his window? A spaceship? No, I will say there's this ringing coming from the music right now that's really annoying. What is up with this copy of the Grizzly Hills OST? That they included this whining noise. Let me play this other Grizzly Hills OST video. Maybe it doesn't have that squeak. I hated that. I was noticing it too. Alright. Back to it.
Debt.com/Shapiro. PBSdebt.com/Shapiro. So, yesterday, she definitely focused in on Zohran Mamdani. It was election day. She focused in, really where it mattered on Zohran Mamdani by blaming the Republicans for the government shutdown. Just slow clap for these. No fighting inside the. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, doing the hard work of fighting the left by, never fighting the left.
Unbelievable take, by the way. That MTG never fights the left. Never wants it. Never happens. Never happens. And the left does not fight her. It just doesn't. It never does so. Doesn't ever happen.
When I ran for Congress in 2020, I ran criticizing Republicans and Democrats equally because I come from a working class family, ran a construction company for over 20 years, and I feel like the government has failed all of us. And it purely disgusts me. It really does. And I represent a district that is rural, manufacturing district, blue-collar workers, and people have been crushed by decades of failure in Washington, D.C. And so I have no...
I love that, from Ben's POV, he sees this as her trying to pander to the left. What this is, okay, MTG is in a lot of ways the right-wing AOC. She is an outsider within the party in many ways because she's, radical and says things that many others in the party would never, have the balls to say. And she does it because she's a populist. Marjorie Taylor Greene is even more of a conservative populist than Trump is. And so she recognizes that to win elections as hard as she has historically, she can't just be the right-wing candidate. She has to be the preferable candidate for as many people as possible. And while it's the prerogative of most conservatives to deny that any economic turmoil is happening and that any American who's struggling deserves help or should be appealed to, while it is their prerogative to pretend we live in a perfect meritocracy and the wealthy and successful deserve their wealth and success and should never have to pay their fair share into the system, for someone like MTG, whose goal is not to necessarily purely please donors and private interests, but she also wants to maintain her political career. She wants to get elected by a lot of people, by a large margin, and to be popular after the fact. And that involves acknowledging real issues that Americans are facing in her district, including ones that Republicans have historically refused to acknowledge are even real problems, such as wealth disparity. For most Republicans, they just talk about wealth disparity like it's a fact of life. Like, work harder, dumbass. What do you mean you want handouts? What do you mean you want a welfare state? Marjorie Taylor Greene, on the other hand, recognizes that people are struggling and says borderline lefty-sounding things because she knows that we've reached a point politically where that pull yourself up by your bootstraps rhetoric doesn't work. Too many Americans are struggling, despite working their asses off and having once been successful until now, to believe this idea that they're just not working hard enough. When you take Americans who for the last few decades have lived their adult lives being able to pay all their bills and saving up money and building up their future, and then all of a sudden they elect the money president guy, as he promised, and now they can't make their car payments, they know it's not their fault. They're not going to buy this Ben Shapiro style argument of they just need to work harder. They've been working their ass off for decades, and now that Trump's in office, they can't afford to pay their bills. Marjorie Taylor Greene tells them, that's the government's fault. Something happened. You deserve better. Ben Shapiro tells those people, you need to work harder. And then he wonders, why is Ben Shapiro's brand of conservatism dying while this Nick Fuentes MTG hyper-populist perspective is getting more popular?
No problem pointing fingers at everyone.
And just to be clear, she also ripped on MAGA explicitly as well as the Republican leadership. But really the reason Zohran Mamdani won is because some of us were critical of people glossing white supremacists. That's probably why Zohran Mamdani won. In fact,
he keeps saying glossing. He's got to mean glazing, right? It's got to be glazing. Glossing is not a term in that context, right? You don't gloss somebody when you're like, is that a term for, I guess, laundering their reputation? Is glossing a term? Am I just showing my low IQ right now or something like that? Or does he mean glazing? Yes, they use gloss and glaze interchangeable. I've never heard gloss before. I've never heard gloss in my life. I've never ever heard glossing in my life in this context. It's always been glazing. He's not going to say glazing, it's too sexually explicit for him. But like, yeah, I guess, but he's made like sexually explicit statements of like, you know what Ben doesn't do? He doesn't use sexual innuendo, but he will, in this very cringy, matter-of-fact way, describe surprisingly explicit sexual topics when it's for the, like, in this very, like, analytical way, right? So, like, he won't say wet-ass pussy, he'll say wet-ass p-word, but he will go into deep detail about, like, gender and sex, right? He'll use all those words, he'll use penis, vagina, and all these words, but only in a very analytical, medical kind of way when talking about a topic. But he'll never, like, use an innuendo. He'll never say something like glazing, I guess. He's very cringe. He's the kind of guy that gets stuffed in lockers in high school.
what we probably should do is unite with white supremacists to defeat Zohran Mamdani while the white supremacists try to drag down the entire conservative movement. That's probably the way we ought to do it. Here was MTG again, doing the hard work of fighting Zohran Mamdani by ripping on MAGA and Republican leadership. Just well done, as always.
He's
You
so
know,
mad.
I think there's a lot of paid social media influencers. And I found it very interesting
Tim
that they were
Pool?
the MAGA accounts, but they're all paid. And they all attacked me when I announced I was coming to join you ladies on The View. And I think that's very weak and pathetic. But when I talk about
I will say, there was no DOJ investigation that outed Marjorie Taylor Greene for taking Russian money. And what she's referring to now is that DOJ investigation that outed folks like Tim Pool were taking hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think millions in some cases, to push pro-Trump talking points from Russia. Marjorie Taylor Greene was not found to be any part in that investigation. Maybe she took money from Russia, who knows, but she's calling out the people who did, and she's referring to the DOJ investigation. And as much as Marjorie Taylor Greene is an evil piece of shit, she didn't take money from Russia. It's the MAGA people who did. And she's calling that out. This is why Ben Shapiro is so mad. Like, there are Republicans now who are not afraid to call out what we all know has been true. And when you got people who are respected within the right-wing sphere, not just progressives, pointing out the obvious, it's going to start opening up a lot of eyes. People don't just assume Trump derangement syndrome when Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks. Remember, she's still very popular and wins by a landslide in every election she runs in. Like, every time Marjorie has run, she won in a landslide victory. She's very popular.
weak Republican men, I'm pretty much talking oftentimes about the leadership in the House and the Senate, and they're not getting our agenda done.
Again, with this kind of, cogent defense of conservative principles there from Marjorie Taylor Greene or from Tucker Carlson, who has spent the last several years demoralizing conservatives by siding with and glossing some of the worst people on planet Earth. And then we're told that unless there's I need an explainer. Truly, I need an explainer, like a statistical explainer on how unifying with people who are actively anti-conservative is going to somehow grow the conservative coalition against the left.
Us versus them, us versus them, us versus them. One thing I will say, by the way, is that this is not a winning talking point. It is not. This probably won't even run well with a lot of Ben Shapiro's own followers. I've seen more conservatives than ever lately that watch conservative content coming into my chats, coming into my comments and saying, I don't agree with everything you say, but I like to listen to your content from time to time to hear what the other side believes. And you're not as crazy as I often hear you are. I've been getting more comments like that than ever. And I get a lot of people who have expressed, conservatives and centrists and just normies who have expressed this really exhausted vibe. Like, they just feel exhausted with this idea that everything has to be us versus them. That, like, for someone like Ben Shapiro, he's making it very obvious right now that his only goal is for the right to epically own the left. Not that he's actually fighting to achieve something, and that the left opposes what he's trying to achieve, and that's why he's fighting them. The way he's talking right now, you can tell he just wants the right to succeed over the left for just to be able to say the left lost, just because he hates the left. He doesn't oppose the left in what it wants to do. He doesn't think the left is trying to oppose what he wants to do. He doesn't really seem to be talking about anything he wants to achieve. He's just on the team against the left, and he's now mad at other Republicans who are fighting at least for some kind of policy. Like, say what you want about Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's not just talking, she's not just yapping, she's actively joining with Democrats to get the Epstein files out. So clearly she's, like, doing something. MAGA and the Republicans don't really stand for anything other than supporting Trump, for the sake of supporting Trump. And this, like, why are you talking to mainstream left-leaning platforms and having conversations with them? We're supposed to be destroying them? This logic sounds like it works when you're on the left, but I can tell you that a lot of people on the right do not want to hear this. They do not want to have one of their favorite and one of the most prominent conservative figures come out and say, oh yeah, what do you mean having conversations and dialogue? This is all about destroying our opponents. Saying that openly, not exactly the winning point Ben thinks it is.
I want an explainer, because it doesn't add up logically or mathematically, and If you want Zoran Mamdani not just to be mayor of New York, but governor of New York, and people like Zoran Mamdani to be president of the United States, then Republicans could definitely do the thing that some seem to want to do, which is fringe out their own party by unifying with a wing that is fundamentally anti-conservative, that disagrees with Donald Trump on many of the key issues of Donald Trump's
How dare they disagree with Donald Trump?
actual platform. That's not a theory, that's an impulse. It's not a well thought out logical idea. It is an act of ideological pusillanimity. Well, that's all for now, folks.
Pusillanimity. Whoa! That auto-played when I clicked the screen. Pusillanimity. Did Ben Shapiro just teach me a new word? A lack of courage or determination. Pusillanimity.
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 Pusillanimity. That's a fun word. Dude, Ben Shapiro. That's the kind of motherfucker you want to, like, study for your English SAT test with. You know, like the English section of the SATs or the PSATs. You wanna study for that with Ben Shapiro, okay? Well, I got all the criticism in the world for that guy, but he's got a vocabulary that would make a dictionary blush. He's always throwing out some new word I've never heard before, and it's like, ah, shit, I gotta add this one to my vocabulary. New one. New English word. Let's go. Conservative equals agreeing with the great leader. Yeah, I love how his final point there was, how dare she criticize or disagree with Donald Trump, our great savior, who's never wrong. How dare you stand against Trump? How dare you criticize him or question him in any scenario? It reminds me a lot of in Red Dead Redemption 2, where, like, everything starts to fall apart as people in the gang begin questioning Dutch. Like, everything in the gang seems like it's stable and healthy until members of the gang start to question Dutch. Then Dutch goes from being this, like, charismatic, like, well thought out, like, always has a plan kind of guy to basically abusive ex, throwing those that he says he cares about into the trash. The second they begin to question him. And then everything falls apart. It reminds me a lot of that. That is what is happening to the Republican Party right now. For a while, things seemed stable because there was this assumption that it was mutual love on the side of Trump and his supporters, but the reality has now come through that it was always just support Trump, never question him, but once you do, that's when you're done. You're done. None of that love was ever there. None of that appreciation ever existed. It was only, as long as you're willing to be a lapdog for Donald Trump, the Republican Party will accept you. The second you so much as question his authority, you're out. You're the enemy. You're opposing conservative thought. Gotta say, this whole purity testing thing, the big right schism, it's not the first time this has happened. Last time something like this happened, it was back in 2017, and shortly after we saw a several years long stint of left-wing cultural dominance, both in real life and on the internet. I have a really strong gut feeling that we're entering another age much like it, if not way bigger than the one years back. So, if you want to be a part of it, you like this video and you want to support it, and of course you want to let me know that I should make more content like this, where I follow up on more of this like Ben Shapiro, right-wing Civil War stuff, leave a like and a comment to let me know you want more. It also helps the channel a lot and boosts my stuff in the algorithm so it reaches more people and competes with the right-wing slop in the algorithm. And of course, if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe, follow my social medias, especially my Discord down below, and yeah, with that said, thank you for watching. As always, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you in the next segment.